This was the third transfer in the last 4 years. Alongside Dad, we 4 siblings and our mom were also quite exhausted from constantly relocating our belongings from one place to another. The most significant challenge was frequently changing schools, adapting to a new environment, and getting accustomed to new people. Just when we would begin to settle in, Dad would announce yet another transfer to a different location. This time, our father was transferred to a rural village located on a small hill quite far from the bustling city. All 4 of us siblings were rather disappointed. Firstly, it was a village, and moreover, it was quite underdeveloped. There wouldn't be a proper school or suitable place to reside, and on top of that, our large family couldn't manage in a small house. Dad informed us that an old bungalow had been prepared by the forest department for us to stay in. No problem. With a heavy heart, we departed from our city residence and embarked on our journey towards the hill. Among the 4 siblings, I, Ravi, was the eldest, followed by my younger brother Sachin, and then our 2 younger sisters, Vini, who was 14 years old, and the youngest, Sony. Vini was the most lively and playful among all of us siblings. Her daily routine always included laughing, smiling, playing, jumping, and sometimes bothering everyone around her. We had also arrived at the newly acquired bungalow. The bungalow was much larger than we had imagined. One part of the bungalow was cleaned and ready for us to live in. The rest of the bungalow was almost half locked up, with some areas in severe disrepair. In some sections, doors were chained. We were exploring the bungalow. An elderly woman approached us, relying on the supportive assistance of a walking cane. She informed us that her ancestors had also been responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of this mansion. She was the sole offspring of her parents. After a period of time following her marriage, her husband unfortunately passed away, so she returned to her parental home and began taking care of this mansion. She appeared to be an elderly woman of approximately 75 years old. Upon seeing our family, she affectionately patted the heads of my 2 little lively sisters and said,
"Allah Hafiz, are you Muslim?" I said with a somewhat strange expression on my face. "Certainly, madam. Kindly ensure that the younger individuals do not venture into the other section of the bungalow. What exactly do you mean by younger individuals? I mean, neither the younger individuals nor the adults ought to venture into the other section of the bungalow. Only the cleaned and properly maintained portion should be utilized." "But why is that so? What is present there?" "There is absolutely nothing. It has remained vacant for numerous years, and the majority of it is in a state of disrepair. It is merely to avert any unfortunate incidents. I simply mentioned it as a precautionary measure. The rest is completely up to you all."
She began to depart, gazing at her walking stick.
"You do not reside in this bungalow?"
Mother inquired with astonishment.
No, I reside in a charming settlement nearby, not too far from this specific location. If you ever need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to me."
We commenced exploring the entirety of the residence. Father and mother became preoccupied with organizing the household belongings. The mansion was exceptionally large, boasting approximately 20 rooms, of which nearly half were sealed off. They were in a state of disrepair. From the remaining 10 rooms, we selected 4 for our use. Even after the children organized their belongings in the rooms, 2 rooms remained unoccupied. These 2 leftover rooms had transformed into the playground for my 2 mischievous sisters. We were enrolled in the local village school. We would often venture out to explore the breathtaking surroundings in the official government vehicle that our father had acquired. The mountainous regions are exceedingly beautiful and captivating. In addition to the natural splendor, another aspect that is quite renowned in the mountains is the tales of black magic and apparitions. My classmates frequently frightened me by narrating ghost stories from various places. I would also return home and, to frighten my younger siblings, I would embellish those tales with additional details when narrating them. When all 3 of them frequently began crying out of terror, I would experience a sense of triumph and a grin would spread across my face. We had only recently arrived here just a few days ago. I was engaged in a game of cricket with my younger brother Sachin. After instructing me to look after the 3 children, Mother completed her tasks and went to sleep peacefully. Both of the younger sisters were also causing quite a commotion in the vacant rooms. I'm not sure what exactly transpired. All of a sudden, a very loud scream was heard. Sachin and I promptly abandoned the bat and ball right at that precise location and quickly dashed indoors. Upon hearing the disturbance, Mother also hastily emerged from her room. We hurried to the hall, but it was completely empty. The continuous sound of crying was resonating from somewhere. It didn't take long for me to discern that the sobbing sound was emanating from the other section of the mansion. I firmly grasped Sachin's hand and I ran into the forbidden part of the mansion. There were cobwebs and heaps of dust scattered all over the place. Looking ahead, I noticed Vinay lying unconscious on the floor, and Sony was standing beside her, crying loudly. Around the same time, Mother also reached us. Observing Vinay in an unconscious state, Mother let out a scream. Somehow, we managed to bring Vinay to a well-ventilated room outside. After comforting Sony and calming her down, I inquired of her. "Why did you see? And Vanini? Could you elaborate on how Mother ended up losing consciousness?"
I didn't observe it. I proceeded to the hall in search of Vinay. She might have retreated to conceal herself in the inner chamber. Upon hearing her scream, I hurriedly returned and discovered her sprawled on the floor in that manner.
Sony, sobbing, said that she started crying upon seeing Mahavini. I was also feeling worse. Should I take care of Mom, or should I take care of Sony, or should I look at unconscious Vini? Sachin quickly brought 2 glasses of water. He handed one glass to Mom and sprinkled the other on Vinay's face, and she slowly started regaining consciousness. Seeing Vinay safe and sound, Mom and Sony stopped crying. Mom lovingly placed her hand on Vinny's head and asked, "What happened?"
What happened, dear? How did you faint? Mother, I was searching for a location to conceal myself, and the entrance to that particular room was closed, but it had a safeguarding thread fastened to it. The moment I opened the door and entered the room, everything seemed to be engulfed in a thick haze of smoke. There was a strange and unusual odor, and when I tried to make my way out, it felt as if the exit had completely disappeared. I was utterly terrified, so I screamed out in fear, and after that, I have absolutely no recollection of how I ended up here.
Vinny elaborated while sipping on water.
So you were actually inside the room? How did you manage to get outside? You were found lying just outside the room.
Sachin said. I'm not entirely certain, brother, but I'm genuinely quite terrified. I will definitely never take that route again.
Vinny responded. During that particular moment, it was more crucial to soothe Vinny's nerves. Thus, the issue was resolved at that point, and Mother began the process of preparing halwa for them. Certain aspects of this incident were troubling me. If what Vinny mentioned is indeed true, then why was there no protective thread visibly tied on the door? Additionally, how did Vinny manage to exit the room? Where did the smoke originate from, and for what reason? What type of aroma are you referring to, Vinay? Peculiar thoughts were surfacing in my mind. In the midst of this, memories of my classmates came to mind. Previously, the tales I would hear for amusement were now causing me to ponder them deeply. A peaceful night's sleep was eluding me. By the time morning arrived, my bloodshot eyes were evidence of my sleepless night. Upon stepping out of the room, I discovered that Vinay was suffering from a fever. This revelation made me anxious once more. It seemed that fear had taken root within him, leading to his feverish condition. Throughout the entire day, Mom was diligently attending to Vinay, yet his fever displayed no indication of diminishing. As the night progressed and grew darker, his fever started to surpass the acceptable threshold. That night, the wise one, she kept mumbling something or the other. In the morning, she was taken to the hospital in Dad's official car. The next 3 days passed with her suffering from a fever in the same way. Mom and Dad were right there with Vinny in the hospital. Ultimately, on the 4th day, we received the encouraging news that Vinny's condition had significantly improved. After spending an additional 2 days in the hospital, Vinny returned home. Vinny is cherished by all of us. Her return brought back the joyful smiles on all our faces. Everyone was gradually returning to their usual routines. Except for one, Vinya no longer leapt around energetically as she used to. She frequently remained seated in a single spot. She would remain seated here observing us as we played. At first, we assumed it was just irritability and weakness stemming from her illness, but this turned into a lasting situation. Vini communicated very sparingly. Most of the time, she remained in her room. Time continued to progress. This persisted for approximately 6 months. We made significant efforts to encourage her to join us in play, to smile. Nonetheless, there was truly no noticeable expression present on her face. She would simply stare blankly into the distance. If we insisted too much, she would simply stand up and withdraw to her room. And she would quietly close the door behind her. Mom and Dad were exhausted from repeatedly asking her what the issue was, but they never received any response from her. Then, one day, Dad arrived home with great excitement. He carried a box of delicious sweets in his hand. In an enthusiastic and lively tone, he called the two younger sisters and handed them the box of sweets. "Oh, I've been promoted, and my salary will increase significantly, and I won't have to relocate for the next 4 years," Dad said happily, and the news of the promotion brought broad smiles to all our faces. Dad attempted to feed Binny some sweets, but she gently pushed his hand away and ran inside. After Dad's promotion, there were no longer any financial issues at home. With the new position, Dad began earning a substantial amount more. The atmosphere at home began to change. Beautiful curtains, expensive clothes, and fine items started to enhance the splendor of our home. Everything was advancing far better than we had initially anticipated, so much so that amid the glitz and glamour, we began to overlook our habit of giving. Gradually, the year was nearing its conclusion. My sweet, lively sister had now transformed into a serious young girl. Her academic performance at school was also declining. Somehow, with some encouragement, she did manage to take the examination. However, the following year, she completely refused to attend school. Over the course of just 1 year, there was a substantial transformation in both her physical appearance and mental state. The once little girl now appeared to have matured into a young woman. My moment. During college, there was a time when I often stayed up late, working on assignments. One night, deeply engrossed in my studies, I stayed awake longer than usual. Suddenly, I heard a whisper. The voice was clearly male, which startled me. Slowly and cautiously, I moved toward the hall. Then I came to the realization that the voice was emanating from Vinny's room. I quietly and cautiously peeked into Vinny's room and observed her standing in front of a wall, whispering something that was inaudible. There was absolutely no one present in the room except for Vinny, and what disturbed me the most was the sound of her voice. A girl who wouldn't utter a single word throughout the entire day was conversing with the walls in a lifeless and eerie voice in the middle of the night. Somehow, I managed to suppress my scream and quietly left from there. It was quite late at night, and I thought it best not to wake anyone up at that moment. How I spent each and every moment throughout that night is really difficult to articulate. When the morning finally arrived, I informed my mom and dad about everything. Mother trembled with the fear of something genuinely ominous. Mother and father quietly commenced searching for a tantric practitioner or an exorcist. 2. Several days later, they discovered a Muslim spiritual practitioner. He provided something to my mother and father to scatter in Jaswini's room and throughout the rest of the house. Somehow, they succeeded in sprinkling it all over the house without Vinny becoming aware. That day, after many years, Vinny ate well. She even smiled a couple of times. Mother possessed an unwavering faith in the tantric's abilities. The subsequent days were remarkably pleasant for our family. Minnie would occasionally come and sit with us for a while, and even smiled a few times, giving us hope that she might eventually recover. Father informed the tantric about the noticeable improvement in Vinny's condition, which significantly boosted his confidence. The following day, he arrived at the mansion and he assured that the entire house would be free of obstacles. As per the instructions of the respected tantric, all the necessary items were prepared in advance. He arrived at the mansion at the scheduled time. After completing all the preparations for the ritual, the exorcist ordered Vinny to be summoned. Vinny looked at the tantric and smiled mysteriously. She had draped her dupatta over her white salwar in an unusual manner, similar to how Muslim women adorn themselves during their prayer times. Observing Vinay in this particular form, we were all quite taken aback. As she made her way towards the ojha, she smiled once more and whispered something in a voice that was distinctly masculine. Almost immediately, the ojha collapsed to the ground, right at that spot. Our blood ran cold with an overwhelming sense of fear. In just a brief period, the ojha's eyes rolled back. Seeing Wasi, Minnie burst into loud laughter and angrily apologized. She commenced staring intently. Then she glanced at each of us and began to head towards her own room. Vinay had gone to her room. We were all still in shock. Somehow, Dad gathered the courage to check the pulse of that exorcist. Beads of sweat appeared on Dad's forehead. He called out to me and instructed me to quickly get the car. Those shallow, intermittent breaths were continuing persistently. Baba genuinely did not want him to pass away. The overwhelming fear of impending disaster caused Dad's hands and feet to tremble uncontrollably. Somehow, we managed to transport him to the hospital and returned home by the time night fell. The house was eerily silent. Mom, Sachin and Sony were sitting together in one room, visibly frightened. Observing the delicate situation, Dad decided to get food from outside. After dinner, nobody wanted to retreat to their rooms. Somehow, after settling Sony with Mom and Dad, Sachin and I returned to our room. I couldn't understand whether to call this mansion haunted. Ever since we moved into this mansion, Dad has made significant progress. Can a haunted house really be auspicious for someone? Could it be that Vinay is experiencing some mental issues, which is why she's behaving this way? But the fact that the exorcist collapsed at that moment and the doctor said he had a heart attack, well, that could happen to anyone. I was trying to evaluate the truth I had witnessed through the lens of science. I was attempting to drift off to sleep. By the time the clock struck midnight, Sachin had already fallen into a deep slumber, but I found myself unable to do the same. To ensure that Mom, Dad, and Sony were all right, I made my way towards their room and noticed Vinay standing just outside Mom and Dad's room. His back was turned towards me, but when I listened intently, I could hear fragments of his words reaching my ears in a series of broken tones. I tried to hide in the room's corner and listen closely.
Please forgive our father and mother. They genuinely desire our well-being. For the sake of Allah, spare their lives or provide assistance, O Allah.
Vinny's voice resonated with me, and hearing her articulate language sent a shiver through my being. When and how did my elder sister, raised in a Hindu family, start speaking such eloquent Urdu? I couldn't focus. All of a sudden, my throat began to parch with thirst. What tales was she earnestly pleading for? What is the enigma of this Urdu language? I was unable to comprehend it. I spent the subsequent days confined to my room. On the third day, as I was seated at the dining table, she made a request for some kheer from our mother. Mom, with delight, prepared kheer for her. Over time, her requests for food continued to grow.
Occasionally, she would request snacks, and at other times, she would ask for fried bread. She would simply take her meals directly to her room. Her clothing and way of living had transformed to resemble that of Muslim women. One day, Mother recalled the old grandmother.
She was a Muslim as well.
What if they have potentially performed some kind of enchantment on my daughter?
She was attributing responsibility to the parents, but what can genuinely be accomplished? She won't readily concede that they engaged in any form of sorcery. We will require someone's assistance. In the evening, Mom expressed her emotions to Dad. I just returned from the hospital after visiting that shaman. Regrettably, half of his body is paralyzed. His tongue has unfortunately become twisted. He is not in a condition to speak or move around freely. Upon seeing me, he began making peculiar noises. I don't believe any sorcerer would want to come to this mansion now. Nevertheless, at Mom's insistence, Dad wandered to various sorcerers for the safety and well-being of their child, but no one was willing to offer assistance. 2 whole months had slowly gone by. We were all feeling rather disheartened. Dad put in considerable efforts to secure his transfer, but regrettably, nothing was working out. It felt as though we were confined within this mansion. Vinny's conduct had turned somewhat unusual. She appeared to be in rather poor health. On several occasions, she lost consciousness. One particular day, when she vomited at the mere sight of food, Mom became increasingly concerned. Unable to devise any solution, Mom resolved to visit the elderly Amma. After inquiring around, Mom eventually discovered her way to Amma's humble dwelling, which was a modest one-room hut with only a few utensils and a cot as household possessions. She looked a bit worried.
What brings you to visit me in person? You could have simply called me instead.
If anything I mentioned upset you, I sincerely apologize. What exactly are you referring to, ma'am? Has something occurred, Amma? You had advised me not to allow the children to go to the other section, but one day my child accidentally wandered there since that time.
Did Mother recount the entire narrative to them? Upon
Upon hearing what Mother conveyed, lines of concern appeared on their foreheads.
How could this potentially be accurate?
They took out a glass of water from the pot and drank it.
Why did you not come earlier? It is far too late at this moment. What exactly do you mean by that? Please prepare yourself, ma'am. What I am about to disclose might potentially be somewhat challenging for you to handle concerning your child. Are you speaking nonsense right from the start? I am telling you the truth. History is indeed repeating itself. This is not occurring for the first time. But how is this possible? Who does it involve? What does all of this mean?
I am going to narrate the entire story in detail, so I kindly ask you to remain patient throughout.
I am definitely not the only child of my parents. I also had an elder sister whose name was Resham. She was 15 years older than me in age. It was approximately 90 years ago. My father was employed as a fourth-class worker in the postal department. The country was under British colonial rule, and the British officers stayed and resided in this place. This grand and expansive mansion was transformed into a postal bungalow, and my father was tasked with its upkeep and maintenance. My father performed his duties with absolute honesty and integrity. My parents resided in the deteriorated section of the mansion, in the very last room. At that time, the room was not in such a poor condition. The 13-year-old sister also used to live with them in the same room. Over time, my sister became increasingly withdrawn, eventually ceasing to venture outside and began confining herself to the room in solitude. Frequently, she would emit peculiar sounds while staring at the walls during the nighttime. Occasionally, she would burst into tears while seated, and at other times she would erupt into laughter. Following your birth, my mother was unable to conceive any additional children. After moving to this mansion, my mother soon became pregnant again. Meanwhile, under the pretense of maintaining the mansion, a lot of money started coming in from the British government. A significant amount of financial resources began to flow in. During that period, when poverty and hunger were prevalent in many places, our household was abundant with nourishment and wealth. Furthermore, we had an opulent mansion to reside in, and my parents regarded themselves as fortunate and envied their own good fortune. The sole distress in their lives was you. Due to your behavior changing progressively day by day, Abu took you to visit the Maulvi and the exorcist on several occasions. However, there was absolutely no improvement in her condition. No doctor, Vaidya, or healer could fully comprehend the root cause of her problem. Meanwhile, Mother was exceedingly overjoyed with the wonderful news of her pregnancy. But then she was confronted with some truly terrifying news. You were the individual from the tree. On that particular day, the midwife who came to visit Mom informed her of this after seeing you, and she was utterly incredulous. How did you, who remained in the room throughout the day, end up from the tree? People pondered. The dread of disgrace shook Mom to her very core. Somehow, she mustered the courage to tell Dad everything. It seemed as though a tempestuous storm had struck the entire household. This situation was beyond the realm of imagination and scientific understanding. How could a young girl inquire so affectionately, yet she didn't provide any response? Even when faced with Abu's scoldings, she didn't utter a single word. With no alternative solution visible, Abu ultimately recounted the entire story to an elder in the village. The uncle provided Abu with the address of a tantric practitioner. Abu carefully took a piece of clothing that had been worn by Resham Appa and proceeded to visit the tantric. The tantric accepted the piece of clothing from Abu, inhaled its scent, and commenced chanting various mantras.
The tantric spoke with Abu. Your daughter's situation is indeed quite challenging, but what precisely has transpired with my daughter, and why is all of this happening? There is no spirit or ghostly presence overshadowing your daughter. If that were the case, I might have been able to rescue your daughter. What do you mean by that? A powerful and formidable Jinn has seized control over your daughter's physical form. Jinns possess extraordinary and immense power, and human beings do not possess the strength to halt them. Jinns dwell in their own distinct realm. They do not enter our world unless they are deliberately summoned. Surely someone must have called it here for their own self-serving motives. But why, my child? Please allow me until tomorrow. I will uncover through my profound meditation the reasons and methods by which this powerful Jinn has come here, and what it seeks from your beloved daughter.
After spending the whole night without any sleep, they arrived at the tantric practitioner early the following morning.
I have been performing tantra rituals in the cemetery throughout the entire night. Your beloved child is presently under the influence of an extraordinarily powerful Jinn.
It was called forth from its own realm for a particular objective. The Emperor dwelling in this grand mansion compensated a sorcerer to satisfy his unseeing ambition.
The individual who uncovered the passageway to that mysterious realm was exceptionally talented. He revealed the hidden secrets of the spirit world to the sovereign to demonstrate his own magnificence. The monarch, in his relentless pursuit to acquire everything swiftly and without effort, summoned them. With anger and frustration filling its eyes from being forced to leave its own realm, the genie questioned the emperor. A sparkle lit up in the king's eyes as he imagined that with the genie's help he could conquer the world.
What? I am the sovereign ruler of Chandpur, and you have manifested in my service. It is your obligation to comply with my command. Upon hearing the emperor's authoritative words, the genie respectfully bowed.
Time's up! They exclaimed with double the velocity and suddenly commenced to expand upwards in the direction of the power. Observing all of this, the monarch began to feel increasingly uneasy. He had thoroughly perused the tome authored by the sorcerer, which stated that a genie fulfills every desire of the individual it acknowledges as its master. Yet this particular genie possessed a distinct disposition. Whenever humans ventured beyond their limits to investigate another, in the eagerness to comprehend the world, any unwise step taken has frequently resulted in devastation. Humans are undeniably the most intelligent and powerful creatures inhabiting the world. Yet their extensive studies and predictions are not invariably accurate. It is not necessarily essential that, unlike Hanuman, this particular genius was causing destruction instead of expansion, and once again, a valuable lesson was imparted. Uncle, let's hurry and return home swiftly, Sachin exclaimed, gently shaking his mother. Sachin's voice brought her back to the current moment.
What happened? Is there something special?
Mother, please go and observe for yourself what has transpired. Upon arriving at home, what she witnessed caused her heart to leap into her throat. She observed that I was both standing and collapsing, while Vinny was speaking in two distinct voices. One voice was unmistakably her own, in which she was frantically calling out for immediate assistance, and the other was a masculine voice, incredibly deep and thunderous in nature. The masculine voice was not entirely distinct, yet it was comprehended that it was articulating something ominous. Vinay's body appeared completely drained of energy, with his neck inclined to the left side. Saliva was dripping uncontrollably from his mouth. His eyes rolled upwards, and both of his hands seemed twisted in different directions. His disheveled hair contributed to making the entire scene even more terrifying. On the other hand, she was mumbling, facing towards Soni Tiwari. Upon reaching home and seeing such a terrifying situation, Mother started trembling uncontrollably. Pleading earnestly with hands folded to allow Vinny and Soni to leave. Observing this, Soni also began to glare intensely at the mother. Everything was so unforeseen and horrifying that the mind appeared to lose its ability to function, and the heart was desperately urging to somehow preserve your life and flee from that place.
We made a mistake by coming to live in this mansion. Whoever you are, we will vacate this mansion and leave by tomorrow. Just for my daughters, I will never return here again.
Mother was wailing.
With bloodshot eyes and a twisted neck, Sony began banging her head against the wall. Items in the mansion started falling from their places. The sound of a part of the roof collapsing in the dilapidated section of the building made us all scream.
Over there she was making a lot of noise. Amidst all of us pounding on the corners, Grandma came and stood behind us. We didn't even realize it. Amma whispered some words in Urdu and placed her hand on Sony's head.
Sony's body was immediately freed from whatever had taken hold of it, and hearing Amma's minister's voice, she put her hands over her ears. She then ran towards her room. The storm rising in the mansion also calmed down. We all embraced each other and continued to cry uncontrollably.
If you hadn't arrived today, Amma, that malevolent spirit would have surely taken possession of my Sony as well. That.
He will not allow any of us to leave this place. We shall all be killed here one by one, Sachin said while crying uncontrollably.
Mother, please suggest a solution. Use your mantra to bring my Vinny back as well. I am unable to do anything further. Madam, this solution will only be effective temporarily. After that period, the Jinn may regain control if it desires. Kindly proceed with your narrative. What transpired subsequently? I am eager to learn the complete truth. The Jinn's fury intensified, and it insisted on an Ifrit. The Emperor was unable to fully comprehend the true significance of the Ifrit. He made an attempt to entice the Jinn with abundant wealth, opulent riches, and exquisite jewelry. But the Jinn became extremely enraged, and in a fit of uncontrollable anger, killed the Emperor right then and there. Subsequently, the Jinn obliterated everything in its path. The entire mansion became completely filled with corpses. Over time, the corpses slowly started to decompose in that very place. As the news circulated throughout the entire village, no one had the courage to approach the mansion. The overpowering stench of the decaying bodies combined with the pervasive dampness within the mansion caused the spirit to enter a dormant state. For numerous years, owing to the absence of any human activity, the Jinn retreated into the most innermost, foul-smelling, and dampest room. Many years went by. Even after an entire decade, when no unfortunate incident took place there, individuals gradually began to forget about the tragic incident and started coming and going around the mansion. Subsequently, the British authorities transformed the long-abandoned mansion into a postal bungalow designated for my father. They were dispatched to this particular location. Over a period of time, the mansion underwent a comprehensive cleaning process. In the chamber where my parents came to reside, even the Jinn manifested in an impeccable form, captivated by the alluring fragrance of the human body. However, the moment he laid eyes on my luxurious silk, he became captivated by its enchanting fragrance, and the Ifrit began to dance with exuberant joy. The Ifrit, referring to the female counterparts of the Jinn, were not deficient in any aspect of wealth, riches, or opulence within their own realm. The sole element that was missing in the realm of the Jinn was the Ifrit, which signifies a female Jinn. Frequently, driven by the desire to acquire an Ifrit, the Jinn abandon their own domain and venture into the earthly realm upon human summoning, called forth by the king through the chanting of Jinn incantations. They were all inscribed in the Arabic language, the genuine significance of which the king did not comprehend. In truth, their interpretation was to arrive, be welcome to this earthly world, abandon all the delights of your own realm, come forth, for she is anticipating your arrival. Come, and with wholeness, reside within this earthly realm, and declare your supremacy over other jinns by being in the esteemed presence of the Ifrit. The Ifrit, for whom the Jinn left its own domain, encountered her in my presence, as delicate and immaculate as a 13-year-old soft cotton fabric. and exquisitely delicate, whose radiant smile appeared to make every single flower blossom, whose enchanting voice could captivate the entire grand mansion. The one whose intense dark gaze had fallen upon her now desired to be whole at any cost. With his truly remarkable and extraordinary abilities, he bestowed immense prestige, opulence, and abundant prosperity into the lives of your parents. Blinded by their insatiable and unquenchable greed, he gradually began to dominate you, completely taking over your mind. He started to perceive himself as the absolute master of your entire body and life. At merely 15 years old, he placed a nose ring on you, turning you into his fixation. Now, he had you completely under his control.
He was manipulating them like a skilled puppet master. Their minds were nearly obliterated, rendering them incapable of grasping anything. The overwhelming pain had so thoroughly overtaken their minds that they couldn't even comprehend what Ami and Abu were attempting to communicate. Throughout the entire day, there was approximately a half hour when their formidable powers would diminish. During that specific period, frequently when some awareness would gradually return, you would quietly exit the room, or occasionally just offer a gentle and warm smile. The process of taking control over a human soul does not occur instantaneously. Gradually, it subjugates and dominates the human soul. If only you had been able to inform Ami and Abu at that very moment, perhaps they might have been rescued from its grasp. The veil of greed and wealth clouded my parents' perception, preventing them from recognizing you. By the time they finally became aware, the evil spirit had already firmly entrenched itself within you at the young age of 15. My father earnestly pleaded with the tantric to save you by any means possible. The tantric initially declined quite clearly, but later on, he consented to evaluate his mystical powers. In accordance with his supernatural abilities, the tantric meticulously assembled all the necessary materials for the intricate rituals, and crafted 3 protective amulets to carry with him the moment he took the initial step through the mansion's entrance. He experienced a sudden jolt akin to an electric shock. The tantric was forcefully hurled inside the mansion. His body gradually began to turn a bluish hue. Observing the tantric's dire condition, Abu and Ami, who were attempting to assess the mystical power, somehow managed to arrange all the ritualistic items on the ground despite their stumbling efforts. As the ritual commenced, an extraordinarily powerful storm emerged and forcefully swept away all the items. The storm's intensity was so overwhelming that it was impossible for anyone to keep their eyes open. Once the storm subsided and the tantric managed to open his eyes, he discovered you standing directly in front of him. You were somehow managing to make your way forward by crawling along. The tantric forcefully hurled a handful of ash in your direction, and a smoky apparition materialized above you. The tantric then commenced his ritual. He meticulously tied an amulet onto Abu and Ami's hands and, after a period of focused meditation, prepared a 3rd amulet. In your grasp, he securely fastened it. In fact, it coincided precisely with the moment when his powers had significantly diminished. Once he had tied the amulet onto you, Resham closed his eyes and summoned his powers once more. After a brief period, he reopened his eyes and conveyed the information. The resolution is contained within the very same book that was utilized to summon him from an alternate world. We must locate that specific book. After conducting an exhaustive search within the mansion's extensive library, the sorcerer ultimately uncovered the incantation by which the spirit could be confined and returned to its original realm.
A faint glimmer of hope had just emerged when, due to the expiration of the designated time limit, the powers commenced their return, and it began attempting to seize control over you once more. You were screaming uncontrollably, scratching at your face and pulling at your hair with your fingernails. Blood began to seep from numerous locations on her body. Witnessing this, her mother fainted and they all stood in stunned silence, observing this horrifying scene unfold. The sorcerer had just commenced reciting the incantations to banish the spirit when it became infuriated upon hearing the spells. In a swift motion, she removed her protective amulet and hurled it far away. In a deep, masculine voice, she growled ferociously. In her intense anger, rather than tears, blood began to ooze from her eyes, not standing on two legs like a human, but instead on all fours like a wild animal. She pounced upon the tantric with the ferocity of a predator. She was now positioned atop the tantric's chest. From his mouth, in fragmented and disjointed words, the ominous proclamation was heard. You dare to separate me from my Ifrit, I shall banish you far away from this world. The tantric possibly perceived that his end time was drawing near, or perhaps he had already comprehended that he would not be able to return alive from this place. What? Despite all the prevailing circumstances, he still undertook such a considerable risk on your behalf. The tantric continued chanting with each and every breath he inhaled. With his final breath, he performed his ultimate spell to imprison the spirits within a compact container. However, he was unable to return her to her original realm. You observed a young girl lying motionless on one side of the protective shield. Comparable to the human body, the inanimate corpse of that formidable tantric was resting there. Another notably significant object present in that particular location was the genie's vessel, and Abu was unsure about what actions to undertake next. He quickly rushed over to Uncle, with the help of his Hindu associate. The box was locked in this room, and from outside, incantations were performed using the protective thread brought from Balaji Maharaja's place. Bound securely with a protective thread, the spirit was now confined within this room, and as a precautionary measure, all the rooms that were connected to this one were permanently sealed off. The remaining parts of the mansion, with the exception of the Stormy Mansion, became accessible. And what became of your silk measuring? The spirit had departed, yet you remained there, completely lifeless. Her physical form had become exceedingly frail, or one might even say utterly hollow. Up until this point, she had been moving around under the influence of the malevolent power, but now she found herself unable to even shift from the bed. The injuries on her body were only deteriorating further as time passed. Furthermore, the malevolent spirit's formidable strength had significantly diminished due to being in the womb of prolonged fasting. After enduring an arduous struggle between life and death for a period of 4 days, they ultimately succumbed. Following your passing, both mother and father were utterly devastated. Mother refrained from eating for numerous consecutive days. Nevertheless, the most important truth is that an individual does not cease to exist alongside the departed. Life inevitably continues onward. Consequently, even after the heartrending loss of their only child, my parents acquired a modest residence in the neighboring settlement to spend the remainder of their lives. And they departed from the mansion permanently. I came into this world precisely 5 months subsequent to your passing, yet even that failed to evoke any emotion in my mother's desolate heart. Throughout my entire childhood, I experienced neglect in this manner. The spirit had exited our lives, but an unusual mental state perpetually haunted my family.
My parents were never able to forget the excruciatingly painful death of their young daughter that occurred right before their eyes. In the overwhelming grief of losing you, my mother departed from my life when I was merely 12 years old. She became beloved to Allah, and now He was merely quietly enduring His days. The joyfulness of our family was shattered. I entered into marriage at the youthful age of 17, and it appeared as though life would become vibrant and colorful, but regrettably, misfortune did not abandon me. Just a few days following the marriage, my husband passed away, and I returned to my father. Father never expressed even a couple of words of genuine tenderness. Deep within his heart, he held on to the firm conviction that my birth was the result of someone's tempting influence. As time went on, life continued in this monotonous and unchanging manner. Now, he has also passed away. At this specific juncture in time, I am merely counting the remaining days of my existence in solitude, yet I am unable to completely comprehend how that genie successfully managed to escape from the confines of the room.
Mother wiped her tears with the edge of her sari and softly said,
It is quite possible that the influence of those mystical chants has diminished over time, and the Jinn is eagerly waiting to emerge from its container once the door is opened. Vinny might have inadvertently opened the door, and the Jinn could have had an impact on her.
After hearing Risham's tale, and there was a lot visible, and tears kept falling from her eyes, but today she wanted to act with wisdom rather than being swayed by her affection.
Amma, at this moment, please provide some guidance. My daughter is also bearing a portion of that malevolent spirit within her womb, and perhaps it has become aware that we are on the verge of taking certain actions.
So then I stepped out of my room. Amma placed her hand on Sona's head while chanting a mantra because at this moment, Mini, who was the subsequent target of the Jinn, laboriously dragged herself into the hall, and Amma felt as though her silk was being pulled along with her. We were completely unaware of what we were about to witness, nor did we comprehend that after losing himself and his desires and being imprisoned for numerous years, the Jinn had become significantly more ferocious and perilous. He did not want to leave Vinny's body at any cost. Vinny fixed her gaze upon Amma and grinned with a terrifying chuckle that sent a wave of intense dread coursing through my entire being. Then she snarled once more in a dual-toned voice.
Should she leave from there?
Amma continued to chant the sacred mantra when Vinny delivered a powerful blow towards Amma, causing her neck to hang limply to one side. Our terrified screams erupted in fear. I will finish every single one of you off, buddy. Again.
You cannot escape from me. Suddenly, a terrifying sound came from Vinny's mouth. The time for the power of birth to begin had come, and Vinny gradually started to calm down. Suddenly, she sat up again and began speaking in a completely different voice.
He wants to change Vinny to look like me. I'm Resham, and I've been lost in this mansion until now, unable to find freedom. He sees my face in Vinny, so he's taken over her mind and shaped her to be like me. This is a very powerful Jinn, and it will destroy all of you. This time, it shall preserve its progeny. But if its progeny enters into the world, we will never be able to send this entity back from this realm. This realm does not belong to the Jinns. Do not allow them to enter, as they will bring about catastrophic destruction with their presence. My abilities are insignificant compared to this Jinn, so I am unable to assist even if I wish to, but I can inform you of the location of the book that contains the incantations necessary to send it back from this place.
Abruptly, an intense gust of wind swept through, causing a book to tumble down right in front of him. Sequentially, the pages of the book commenced turning and then halted at a particular location.
First, carefully inscribe this powerful mantra onto a piece of paper and subsequently dissolve it in water. Then, using that water, form a protective circle and ensure that each of you is seated within it, collectively reciting these potent mantras. Do not underestimate the formidable strength of that symbol. It will endeavor to frighten and bewilder you. However, do not cease.
In accordance with what Resham mentioned, Mother swiftly transcribed the incantations from the book onto a sheet of paper and dissolved it in a glass of water.
But all these chants are written in Arabic. We can't read them. They have to be read in Arabic. I'll write down their pronunciation here. Hurry up. It's almost time for them to return.
I had discovered one final method to rescue my sister. In accordance with Resho's detailed instructions, we had completed all the necessary preparations. Mother carefully drew a circle using water in a glass, and we collectively began chanting the mantra. We were reciting the mantra in a fragmented manner. Upon hearing the sound of the chants, Vinny came rushing out of her room. She was screaming with all her strength, covering her ears with her hands. In just a few brief moments, blood started to trickle from her ears. For the very first occasion today, we observed that terrifying figure with our own eyes. She was visibly shaking, desperately begging with clasped hands for us to stop the chants. The horrifying voice reverberated throughout the entire room. I shall not depart from this place by myself if you do not stop this method immediately, I shall tear it apart right now. Venu's hands started to twist in the opposite direction. Her eyes were rolling back in pain. Mother was gradually losing consciousness, witnessing her condition. Mother, he desires for us to cease chanting the mantra. Do not gaze at him. Do not shift from your position. Binny was wailing loudly. It appeared as though someone was ripping her body apart from within. Occasionally, she would slam her head against the walls, and at other times she would tug at her hair. Each of her agonizing screams made our souls weep tears of blood. However, according to Resham's instructions, without fear, we recited those chants 108 times. In the end, there was a loud scream. She was thrown far away. It seemed like her whole body was hit hard by a strong lightning bolt. In the very subsequent moment, everything turned completely silent. It seemed that the spirit had returned to its own realm. Vinny was in an extremely dire condition, with blood oozing from nearly every part of her body. We hurriedly took her to the hospital. After several months of intensive treatment, my sister eventually recovered. The demonic child that was developing inside her also vanished on its own as soon as the demon departed. Vinny's body healed. However, this had such a profoundly significant impact on her mental state that my sister was never able to lead a normal life again. She spent the remainder of her existence resembling a living corpse. That mansion inflicted such profound wounds upon us that we could never forget. Years passed since this event. One day, I made the decision to call Vine for our evening meal. "Vinay, please come and have dinner, Vinay," I called out as I made my way to Vinay's room, only to discover it was completely empty. Where could she have possibly gone at such a late hour in the night? I pondered as I proceeded to the terrace to search for her. Upon reaching the terrace, I saw Vinny had once again elegantly draped her city with a beautiful scarf and was smiling while gazing thoughtfully to one side. Observing this peculiar scene sent a shiver coursing through my entire body. With fear, I glanced in the opposite direction and saw a smoky apparition ominously hovering in the air. In a state of ominous apprehension, I let out a loud, piercing scream and collapsed to the ground, my eyes wide with terror, signaling a great impending catastrophe.